No humans were harmed or even used in the creation of this program. We created it from a script written by the presenter using a generative artificial intelligence platform. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome to today's program, Burnout in the Legal Profession. My name is Zach McGee. I'm a Senior Vice President, Business Affairs for Sony Pictures Entertainment. Prior to joining Sony Pictures, I was an in-house lawyer at NBC Universal, and before that, I was a lawyer at Davis Polk. I've been writing and speaking on legal education topics for the past 20 years, including having taught a course on legal ethics at Pepperdine Law School. As you might expect, I am speaking today solely on behalf of myself, and my views don't reflect those of my current or any former employers or institutions with which I've been affiliated. We are talking today about wellness competence, and more specifically burnout in the legal profession, because California recently increased to 2 hours, from 1 hour, the competence CLE credit requirement, and at the same time, added 1 hour of wellness competence training as an optional way for attorneys to satisfy one of the required 2 hours of competence CLE credit. Clear as mud? I hope I didn't lose anybody there. To clarify, California lawyers now have to do 2 hours of competence CLE credit instead of just 1, and one of those 2 hours can be by taking a 1-hour program on wellness competence. You can still satisfy the competence CLE credit by taking 2 1-hour programs dealing with the prevention and detection of substance abuse or other mental or physical issues that impair a lawyer's ability to perform legal services. That is 2 1-hour substance abuse programs. Or you can do 1 substance abuse program and 1 wellness competence program. I hope that explains what today's program is and why we're doing a program in this area. So what is wellness competence as the California State Bar defines it? The California State Bar says that CLE programs that satisfy the new wellness competence requirement should, quote, encompass practical strategies for managing mental health, stress, and overall well-being that are tailored to the legal profession, end quote. Today, we are going to focus on what I believe is the most important aspect of wellness competence, which is professional burnout among lawyers, including what it is, how it impacts attorneys in and out of the office, how to spot it, and how to address it. I suffered from professional burnout at the end of my time working at a law firm, so I bring my own personal experience to this topic, in addition to being able to present some learnings from experts in this field, along with some pretty sobering statistics. So what is professional burnout? A German-American psychologist named Herbert Freudenberger is credited with popularizing the term professional burnout in organizational psychology literature in the early 1970s. Unlike substance use disorder, with which you might be familiar from other competence programs you have taken over the years, professional burnout is not a psychological or medical disorder that you will find in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5. The reason it is not listed there is because it is classified as an occupational phenomenon and not a medical condition, but to my mind, that is a distinction without a difference, and one that is probably only relevant to academics, doctors, and psychologists. For our purposes, it is enough to note that professional burnout is recognized as an occupational phenomenon that you can find listed in the International Classification of Diseases, 11th revision, known as the ICD-11, published by the World Health Organization. While lawyers and laypeople may talk about burnout in general terms, it is important to know that professional burnout has a specific definition determined by experts following years of study. Professional burnout is defined in ICD-11 as follows. Quote, burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It is characterized by 3 dimensions: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy, end quote. Burnout refers specifically to phenomena in the occupational context and should not be applied to describe experiences in other areas of life. One expert in this field, Paula Davis, who runs the Stress and Resilience Institute, made a great observation when she wrote recently that burnout is complex. People oversimplify burnout when they only focus on one of the big dimensions of it, exhaustion, and prescribe self-help remedies like sleeping more, time management techniques, or exercising as quick fixes. We'll do our very best not to make that mistake in our discussion today. Rather, we will take a truly comprehensive view of professional burnout among lawyers by examining its causes, symptoms, and risk factors before discussing strategies that you can employ to avoid becoming burned out. Or if you cannot avoid it, how best to address it in the context of your legal career. Let's review the main causes of professional burnout among lawyers with some help from our fellow lawyers. Each of these categories encompasses a lot of what practicing lawyers deal with on most days, so it's not possible to cover everything, but I'll do my best to mention a few things in each category to make it clear what we are talking about.
I'm 100% committed to my clients and my work. You can call or email me day or night. I'll sleep when I'm dead.
At the top of the list is intense work demands. Intense work demands cover things like having to be available to your clients 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as well as the sky-high stakes that lawyers face on many of the matters that we handle for clients. Clients can win or lose millions of dollars as a result of the matters we handle for them, and that makes the work we do intense and, as a result, high stress. I also should mention the fact that lawyers are at the mercy of our clients and our law firms or companies. If a new matter comes in that needs to be jumped on right away, you can forget about that trip to Europe that you and your spouse have been planning for the past year. The unpredictability of our work schedules is part of why intense work demands are often a feature of the practice of law. We also need to include in this category the fact that most law firms are partnerships, which in turn creates the intense competition that lawyers who are on the partner track experience on a day in, day out, and year in, year out basis. If you think about it, the partner track effectively requires each associate who wants to be a partner, or who at least doesn't want to be viewed as not wanting to be a partner, to audition for that job every day for a period of 7 or 8 years. You come to work every day feeling the pressure to perform at a high level and at a level that is better than most of the other lawyers in your class. Just talking about it makes it sound truly awful, and that's how many lawyers who are on the partner track feel about it each and every day.
If I have any hope of making partner, I need to bring in new business.
The next category is acquiring new business. The pressure that many lawyers feel to bring in new clients or to solicit existing clients for more work is another factor that can precipitate professional burnout. It depends on your personality, but someone like me who never likes to ask others for anything, it was particularly stressful to try to bring in new clients because that is asking them to give you work. Of course, if you are lucky enough for a client to say yes and give you a new matter, then you have the added stress of wanting to do a great job for that client. Acquiring new business is also stressful to the extent that it is a requirement to make partner at many firms. So in addition to having to do a great job on your work and to be better than your peers, you have an added stressor of needing to bring in new matters. It's not surprising that acquiring new business can lead to professional burnout.
Last year I billed 2,300 hours. If I can get to 2,800 or more this year and keep it up for the next couple of years, I'll have a good shot at making partner.
Excessive workload is our next category, and it's pretty obvious to everyone, including non-lawyers, how much lawyers work. The idea that you would be expected to bill 2,000, 3,000, or even more hours per year in order to be successful as a lawyer is truly staggering. Most professionals who work hard don't approach that level of work, so I think this is a factor that is unique to lawyers, or perhaps to lawyers and doctors who are also notorious for how much they work, particularly early in their careers when they are medical residents. For most lawyers who bill this many hours, it's not that they do it because they love what they do, although there are some lawyers in that category. It is because they want to make partner at their law firms, and they believe that in order to make partner, they need to bill that many hours. It's the partner track that leads to excessive workload for the most part.
The other side just filed a motion to compel, and I need to get our response out by tomorrow before my client's deposition next week.
Our next factor is excessive time pressure. I remember thinking when I was preparing for the LSAT that this test is crazy because no lawyer ever has to do anything important in so little time, but I could not have been more wrong. As practicing lawyers know, while we often have days or weeks to write a brief or to prepare to negotiate a big deal, there are other times when we need to think and act very quickly in response to some unexpected development. Something comes in that morning and you end up working all day and late into the night to respond to it. Excessive time pressure, along with the unpredictability of when you will be called upon to do your very best work, can cause lawyers to suffer from professional burnout.
The worst part of my job is that I don't have any control over my schedule. I can be expected to work any day, any time, and it's hard to live your life without the ability to plan.
Moving down our list, lack of autonomy is another big factor. I hinted at this before when I mentioned how client or law firm demands can come at any time, and that is a difficult way to experience work if you hope to have any kind of realistic work-life balance, which, as we will see later, is important to preventing professional burnout. Beyond a lack of autonomy due to unpredictable client or law firm demands, I think there also can be a lack of autonomy that arises from how law firms, and to a lesser extent, in-house legal groups, operate. Particularly when you are a junior associate at a law firm, you are in some sense a mere cog in the machinery. You don't get to decide what work is done on a matter, and you may not have much contact with the client. You are simply being given tasks and expected to complete them well and on time, and then to move on to the next task. In-house lawyers tend to experience less of this, mostly because there are fewer in-house lawyers than law firm lawyers. And lawyers who go in-house tend to be more senior at the time they go in-house, as most companies don't hire lawyers right out of law school. That said, in my experience, you still can feel a lack of autonomy as an in-house lawyer because you are a lawyer and not a business person, and so you may never or only rarely be the person who gets to make a decision at the company, as opposed to the lawyer who does what is needed to paper or implement whatever decisions are being made by others. That can leave some in-house lawyers feeling powerless and burned out as a result.
We missed a document that should have been produced and the partner blamed me, even though no one told me I was responsible for reviewing those files.
Our next factor is lack of role clarity. Ideally, in law firms, you want to have leaders, be they partners, counsels, or senior associates, who give clear direction to the team so that each member knows exactly what he or she is responsible for. I worked on many large teams at my law firm, and for the most part, we were given clear roles and responsibilities. For example, on one case, we had a senior lawyer who was working only part-time on our matter, and so she was responsible for dealing with our expert witnesses. That worked great because she knew what she had to worry about, and also that she didn't have to worry about everything else that was going on in the case. Of course, teams don't always have good leadership, and roles can be unclear as a result. In those cases, as inevitably happens, something in the case goes wrong, and then blame gets meted out to the team, often unfairly. These sorts of experiences can leave lawyers feeling dissatisfied in their work, particularly if that experience is the rule and not the exception.
I am working so hard at my company, but I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. No one ever leaves the legal department, so I don't know how I have any chance of ever becoming our general counsel.
Rewards not matching expectations is a broad topic. It can encompass everything from feeling that your salary and yearly bonus don't measure up when compared to the number of hours you are billing for your law firm, to working hard for 7 or 8 years and then not making partner. I think most law firms are getting better at signaling to lawyers who aren't likely to make partner that they shouldn't be expecting that outcome, but I think some lawyers are still surprised at the end of that very long road. Feelings that the rewards you are receiving are not commensurate with the expectations you have based on the level of effort you are putting in, and the sacrifices you are making can be a factor in professional burnout.
I feel lost working at this law firm. I have a mentor who was assigned to me, but she never reaches out, and I don't feel comfortable asking her for a meeting. I also spend too much of my time doing administrative work on top of my work as a lawyer.
Inadequate support is another broad topic. You can include lack of mentorship in this bucket, along with a lack of resources to help lawyers deal with the demands of their job, as well as a lack of resources to address issues that some lawyers experience, such as substance use disorder or mental health challenges. But you also could include a lack of help with administrative tasks, as many lawyers believe they spend too much of their time dealing with such tasks, and that can be a factor that contributes to professional burnout. Another common complaint is a lack of support from colleagues, particularly in this new age of remote work. The kind of camaraderie that I experienced when I was working at a law firm by spending many late nights at the office with my peers, and often also with the more senior lawyers, to accomplish some important task has been replaced with all of those lawyers working the same long hours but by themselves at home and connecting only over Zoom. As bad as it was to be at a law firm at midnight on a Thursday, it was made slightly better by commiserating over a conference room dinner with my colleagues, all of whom were working together to get the job done. Many lawyers today only experience the work part of that and not the camaraderie.
The partner I am working for right now is the worst. He criticizes everything I do, and he never tells me that I did a good job, even when we have a big win in the case.
Unfair or disrespectful treatment can be discrimination on the basis of a protected characteristic like sex or race, and of course that still happens in law firms and companies, although much has been done in terms of changes in the law and the legal ethics rules to try to root out that sort of misbehavior. Unfair or disrespectful treatment that isn't based on a protected characteristic is still alive and well in law firms and companies, unfortunately. Some partners and senior associates are petty, rude, mean, condescending, and display every other bad personality trait you can think of. Maybe it's because they are under extreme workload and other pressures, or maybe it's because they were treated this way by their superiors when they were coming up. None of that excuses this behavior, even if it may serve to explain it. Obviously, the motivations don't matter as much as the effect that unfair or disrespectful behavior can have on its victims. And it's another big factor that can lead lawyers to experience professional burnout.
I didn't go to law school because I wanted to work for a law firm that represents payday lenders. I still can't believe that I spend most of my days defending business practices that prey on poor people.
Our last factor is labeled value conflicts, and it can include things like working for a law firm that represents Exxon if you believe fossil fuels are destroying the planet, to working for a company that plays fast and loose with the law when it suits their purposes. In most cases where your personal values conflict with the values of your law firm or company, your best option is to find another law firm or company that is a better fit. But in the months or sometimes years before you are able to make a move, being forced to work at a place that offends your personal values can be a source of professional dissatisfaction that can lead to burnout. As I mentioned in the introduction, I spent most of my time as a young lawyer working as an associate in the litigation department of Davis Polk. By the end of my 7-year stint at the firm, I definitely was suffering from professional burnout. Of the 10 factors we have been discussing, the 2 factors that contributed most to my own case of professional burnout were excessive workload and intense work demands. The pressure to bill a tremendous number of hours each year that most law firm associates feel is a key cause of professional burnout, and it certainly was for me at Davis Polk. If you are at a law firm where most associates bill north of 2,000 hours a year, and many law firm associates bill much more than that, I don't know how you escape professional burnout, because at those levels of billable hours, your work life necessarily crowds out almost everything else, that is, your family life, your friendships, your fitness routine, your hobbies, and your travel plans. There are simply not enough hours in the day or in the year to find time for these other activities when you are billing so very many hours. The other problem is that you don't control your schedule when you work at a law firm. So in addition to billing so many hours, you can be required to work on any day and at any time, which makes it even worse. Even if you love the work, and I certainly met people at Davis Polk who absolutely loved what they were doing, billing that many hours is simply too much for most people, myself included. If you merely liked what you were doing, which described me for the most part during my time at Davis Polk, the pressure to bill that many hours is going to make it that much worse. While my work as a litigation associate was intense in many ways, I want to focus for now on the pressure I felt to try to make partner, because to my mind, it was the main reason that I felt I was being subjected to intense work demands at Davis Polk. Nearly all law firm associates feel intense pressure to make partner, or at least to remain on the partner track, while they are working at a law firm, and it was no different for me. Some associates who come to law firms decide early on that they don't want to be a partner, and instead are going to spend a few years at the firm getting some good training, making some good money, and networking. And then they plan to use their law firm experience to get them their next role, perhaps as an in-house lawyer, or as a lawyer at another law firm, or maybe moving to the business side and not doing law at all. I had friends at Davis Polk who chose this path, and in general, I think they were a lot happier because they had made the decision not to run on the hamster wheel that the rest of us were on because we wanted to be partners, or at least we wanted to have the opportunity to be made partners, and didn't want to be thought of as someone who didn't want that. At Davis Polk, and I suspect at most other prestigious law firms, most associates in each class are on the partner track, or at least they don't want to be seen as not being on the partner track. Now, the reality at most firms is that only a few of the associates that enter each year are going to be made partners. At Davis Polk, it was something like 8 or 10 partners in each year versus the approximately 100 associates who start each year. So you are facing pretty long odds right at the jump. You can convince yourself that your odds aren't really that bad because by the time partnership decisions are made in your 7th or 8th year, there might only be 10 or 15 associates left in your class due to all of the attrition. But the bottom line is that it is very difficult to make partner at any law firm. This is before you consider any of the other factors that you simply cannot control. For example, if you come up for partner during an economic downturn, your odds go down a lot, and that can scuttle your partnership chances just as you are nearing the finish line after a race that you've been running for nearly 8 years. So if law firm lawyers face such long odds of making partner, why is nearly everyone at law firms on the partner track? For my part, making partner at a law firm was just the latest hurdle that I was trying to leap over in my long academic and professional career. I was driven to do well in high school to get into a good college, to do well in college to get into a good law school, to do well in law school to get a good law firm job, and finally, to do well there to make partner. Most lawyers are type A and probably look at a law firm partnership the same way that I did. It was yet another credential I wanted to earn. Plus, when you are working at a law firm, you see the many benefits of being a partner. These are powerful people both within the law firm and in society generally, who make a lot of money and who are given a lot of respect, so who wouldn't want to be a member of that club? There is a dark side to law firm partnership that I will talk about next, but few lawyers would say they wouldn't rather be a partner than an associate. Speaking from my own experience at Davis Polk, when you are a brand new lawyer at a law firm, your life is pretty good. Yes, you are working a lot, but your overall stress level generally is pretty low. That is because when you are a very junior lawyer, you are, for lack of a better word, fungible, by which I mean that you or any one of your 100 or so colleagues can be asked to do roughly the same work. Someone needs a legal research memo written or some documents reviewed in a diligence room, or a deposition transcript summarized. A partner grabs one of you, gives you the assignment, you complete it, and then you wait for your next assignment. You don't have overall responsibility for the matter or the client or for anything else. That responsibility falls on the senior associates and the partners, and this is why the level of stress steadily increases as you move up the ladder in a law firm. If you're a senior associate and you ask a junior associate to research and write a legal memo on a topic, if the junior associate does a bad job, guess who has to redo the legal memo? That's right, you have to do it. So, unless you are an associate who has expressly taken him or herself off the partner track, every year that you spend at a law firm will involve more responsibility and more intense work demands than the year before. This is true of junior partners as well. They face the most intense work demands of anyone in a law firm because they have responsibility for everyone who works on the case, and they answer to the more senior partners who own the relationship with the client. The solution that I ultimately chose to relieve my professional burnout was to leave Davis Polk and take a job as an in-house lawyer. That's a common choice among law firm lawyers, and it was the right choice for me for reasons I'll cover off later. I'm glad I didn't become a partner at Davis Polk because I would not have been happy in that role. In addition to increasingly intense work demands, it's no longer the case that once you make partner, you have it made and can simply relax. On the contrary, junior partners are even more trapped than associates. Not only are you responsible for everything that happens on your matters, so your stress level is higher than when you were an associate, now you really can't leave the firm because you'd be walking away from a partnership that you spent the last 8 years working your butt off for. You'd be walking away from all of that power and prestige and, of course, all of that money. You've probably become accustomed to that money, the nice house or houses, the nice cars, the kids in private schools, and so it would be particularly hard to leave it behind. Maybe things would be better at another law firm, so you finally end up returning the calls of that headhunter who has been chasing you to switch law firms. But guess what? You can't move to another law firm as a partner unless you can bring most of your clients with you, your so-called portable book of business. If you have a portable book of business that generates $20 million in annual billings, you can move to another law firm as a partner and even be given a nice, guaranteed salary for the first few years. But if you don't, you're stuck where you are. If I had stayed at Davis Polk and made partner but then wanted to leave, what are the chances I could have taken J.P. Morgan Chase, Deutsche Bank, or any of the other clients on whose matters I worked with me to another law firm? 0. Those are all institutional clients that Davis Polk has been representing for dozens of years. Indeed, John W. Davis, the founder of Davis Polk, actually represented J.P. Morgan, so that client isn't going anywhere. My only choice at that point would have been to go in-house, where I likely could have secured a job as a general counsel, but I wouldn't have had the option to make a lateral move as a partner to another law firm. The other sad fact about law firm partnerships is that they don't get much better as you become a more senior partner. In the old days, as partners became more senior, they would move into a rainmaker role where their primary job was to bring in new clients and keep the clients they already had happy, as opposed to actually working on their matters. In those days, senior partners spent more time on the golf course than in the office, but those days are long gone. When I was at Davis Polk, I worked closely with senior partners in their 60s and 70s who were billing north of 2,000 hours a year. For some, it was peer pressure that drove them to bill so many hours, and for others, they loved the work so much that they would do it for free. That is why I say the latter are the only people who should be law firm partners. If you love the work so much, you would do it for free. For everyone else, the money doesn't make it worth the sacrifice, and in some cases, chasing that money ends up making lawyers miserable. Now that we know a bit more about what professional burnout is and what are some of its main causes, let's turn now to the impact that burnout can have on both individual lawyers and the organizations in which we work. We are going to talk about the signs or symptoms of professional burnout that lawyers may experience in a bit. So for now, we want to focus only on the macro effects that professional burnout can have on individuals. For this, we turn to survey data, in this case, in the form of a Gallup poll originally taken in 2018 that was updated in 2023. That poll surveyed 7,500 full-time employees in the United States, so it was not limited to lawyers, and the findings are pretty sobering. The survey found that 28% identified as feeling frequent or constant burnout at work, while an additional 45% reported feeling burned out at least sometimes. With regard to the 28% who identified as always or often feeling burned out at work, they were 63% more likely to call in sick, 50% less likely to speak with their supervisors about their performance goals, 23% more likely to present to an emergency room, and 2.6 times more likely to leave their current employer. Of course, none of these is a good outcome, either for the individual who is feeling burned out or for the organization that employs him or her. What about the prevalence of burnout among lawyers specifically? There are a couple of studies that have been done that provide equally sobering data. In 2021, Bloomberg Law conducted an attorney work and hours survey in which 52% of respondents reported feeling burned out. In 2022, Axiom conducted a survey of in-house lawyers, and 47% of those lawyers reported feeling very or extremely stressed or burned out. The latest study I could find of lawyers was conducted in 2023 by the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago, a nonprofit organization that promotes attorney well-being. In that study, 4,450 Massachusetts lawyers were asked about their level of satisfaction with their work lives, and a whopping 77% reported having experienced some level of professional burnout. While the lawyers in these studies likely were using different definitions of professional burnout, the data is still compelling even if it is only directionally valid. One question that lawyers often ask when being presented with these sorts of statistics is how do lawyers compare to other high-stress professions like doctors? While it's impossible to do an apples-to-apples comparison, the consensus of research on burnout among doctors finds that about 50% of doctors have one or more symptoms of professional burnout. So at a high level, lawyers are roughly on par with doctors in terms of professional burnout, and we potentially experience it at even higher rates than doctors if you look at studies like the latest one that surveyed Massachusetts attorneys. At the end of the day, It's hard for anyone to argue that lawyers don't experience professional burnout at a rate that is higher than the general population, or that professional burnout doesn't take a heavy toll on the lawyers who suffer from it, including poorer physical health, less professional ambition, and a greater tendency to leave their jobs. On the flip side of the same coin, the costs of professional burnout on businesses, including law firms, are significant and have been well documented. The first cost is absenteeism. If burned out workers are 63% more likely to call in sick, their employers are going to experience absenteeism. That leads to lower productivity and, equally troubling, the need to lean on others in the organization to cover for the absent worker, which in turn can lead to excessive workload and intense work demands being placed on the employees who are left. The opposite of absenteeism is presenteeism, which is an employee who is at work but isn't really there to work, or at least isn't being very productive in whatever work he or she is doing. According to a 2019 Forbes estimate, disengaged employees are 34% less productive than their colleagues, and that loss of productivity imposes a substantial cost on companies. Burned out employees also can cost their employers in terms of increased levels of conflict in the workplace. Employees who are burned out can experience irritability and cynicism, and this can negatively affect their interactions with colleagues. Errors also can occur when employees are burned out, either because they are moving too quickly to accomplish the tasks being required of them, or because they are unable to focus adequately on those tasks. The final cost for organizations is probably the largest one: increased employee turnover. Forbes estimated in 2019 that professional burnout accounts for 20 to 50% of all employee turnover, which is a staggering statistic, and one that aligns with the Gallup poll, finding that burned out employees are 2.6 times more likely to leave a job. When an employee quits, the employer suffers substantial costs, both in terms of finding his or her replacement and then training that new hire. The high costs of employee turnover are arguably highest when we are talking about law firms. According to the National Association for Law Placement, each associate that leaves his or her law firm costs that firm between $200,000 and $500,000. That is a huge hit to the bottom line, and I am sure that every law firm would like to avoid or minimize those costs. Switching gears, what are some of the symptoms that lawyers who are at risk of becoming burned out experience? While every lawyer is different, just as every person is different, there is a list of 10 symptoms that are common to many lawyers who have experienced professional burnout. Let's examine these symptoms with the help of our lawyer colleagues.
I worry about my matters. I worry that I am not doing enough to bring in new business. I worry about my chances of making partner. It's a lot for a 25-year-old to handle.
At the top of the list is anxiety. Everyone has some level of anxiety, but burned out lawyers have anxiety in spades. If you look back at the list of what causes professional burnout, intense job demands, excessive workload, and excessive time pressure, to name just 3, how can you not suffer from anxiety? I feel anxious just reading the words intense job demands and thinking back to my years at Davis Polk.
I don't know what is wrong with me. I just feel tired all the time.
The same is true with our next symptom, fatigue. I remember one remarkable stretch at Davis Polk where I went 6 months without a single day off. I don't care if you're Superman, or I guess I should say a super lawyer as your marketing department likes to call you, you are going to feel extreme fatigue if you are working as a lawyer in a situation that doesn't allow you to maintain a healthy work-life balance.
I always wanted to be a lawyer, and now I am one. And I have a job at a prestigious law firm. So, why do I feel so miserable?
The next symptom on the list is career or life dissatisfaction. This one may be hard to see in the moment. When I was working at Davis Polk, and as intense and demanding as my job was, I wouldn't have answered yes if someone had asked me if I felt dissatisfaction with my career or with my life. On the contrary, and we will discuss this personality trait that many successful lawyers have in our next section, I would have chalked up my lack of current happiness to the need to sacrifice now in order to reap the rewards later. Many lawyers have a remarkable capacity to tolerate pain if they believe they are simply delaying gratification into the future. For example, they are miserable now because they are on the partner track, but once they make partner, they will receive all of that deferred happiness and then some. For many, this isn't true, even if they end up making partner, because there is a dark side to law firm partnership that I mentioned earlier. For now, just be aware that career or life dissatisfaction is a symptom of professional burnout and that it can be hard to spot when you are in the middle of it. It's only later, with the benefit of hindsight and from the perspective of someone who is working in a legal or other job that affords you a much better work-life balance, that you are able to see how truly miserable you were and to understand why you didn't see it at the time.
I don't know what to do. The things I used to enjoy, like spending time with my family, don't make me happy anymore. I just feel sad all of the time now.
Depression is our next symptom. The key point to take away here is that depression is a clinical diagnosis, and it is more than just ordinary sadness. Sadness that is a symptom of depression doesn't have a specific trigger. You simply feel sad or hopeless about everything. Also, thoughts of self-harm don't arise from non-depressive sadness. If you think you might be experiencing depression as a symptom of professional burnout or otherwise, you need to seek professional help right away. There are many tragic cases of lawyers who took their own lives, including a peer of mine at Davis Polk, who actually had made partner at the firm and otherwise seemed to be living a very happy life, and at least some of those tragedies could have been averted if they had sought help. Every state bar has resources available to help lawyers who might suffer from depression or other mental health issues, as do many law firms, so please ask for help if you think you might need it.
I find myself drinking every night of the week because it helps with the stress. I've thought about cutting back, but each new week presents the same challenges at work and at home, and I just can't make it through without something to calm me down.
Our next symptom, unhealthy coping, including substance abuse, is similar in that many lawyers who suffer from depression also suffer from substance use disorder. In either case, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to overcome these conditions without some help. Clearly, if you are using alcohol or drugs as a way to cope with the professional burnout you are experiencing, that should be relatively easy to see. When that misuse crosses over into substance use disorder, it's a harder line to draw, but there are many tests that lawyers can use to see if they or others they know might have a substance abuse problem. One such tool is the CAGE questions, which is a useful screening tool for problematic drinking. A yes answer to 2 or more of the 4 questions is a sign of a problem. C stands for attempting to cut down. A is whether the person gets annoyed by criticism for drinking. G is whether the person has ever felt guilty about drinking. And E stands for eye-opener, for example, morning drinking. This is an easy-to-use and important tool to keep in mind when you are thinking about your own situation and what you might observe among your colleagues. Of course, there are countless other CLE programs that can help educate you about depression and substance use disorder, and I would encourage you to check them out.
I end up going to bed after midnight most nights, and then I lie awake in bed for several hours. I just got too many things to worry about and I can't seem to turn my brain off.
Sleep disturbance is another common symptom of professional burnout. Many of us have trouble turning off our brains at night, particularly if you keep looking at your phone right before bed in order to fall asleep and to stay asleep through the night. But the challenge gets infinitely harder if you are overly stressed out about your job. The worst thing about being unable to sleep is that a lack of sleep then can lead to other symptoms, such as the 2 we are going to cover next, which are headaches and irritability or cynicism.
I never used to suffer from headaches, but now I get them all the time. It's hard to focus on work when my head is throbbing.
Of course, headaches can be caused by any number of things, but lack of sleep and stress are often precipitating events for people who suffer from headaches.
I don't know what's changed, because I used to be so easygoing. I think the stress just makes me irritable, and then I react to that when people around me aren't pulling their share of the load.
The same is true of irritability and cynicism. When you don't feel like yourself because of too much stress, too much fatigue, and not enough sleep, you don't act like yourself. This might manifest itself as irritability or outward displays of cynicism toward your work colleagues and members of your family. None of this is a good way to experience your work or home lives.
I know it's your birthday and that all of our friends from college will be there, but I just don't feel like going out tonight. I'm sorry.
Social withdrawal is another symptom of professional burnout. When you're suffering from burnout, many people simply want to get away from whatever is stressing them out the most at the time. That might be your work or your home life, and the tendency is just to want to be by yourself. That might mean declining those dinner or party invitations that you otherwise would have been excited to accept. Professional burnout can very easily cause you to spiral into a place where you are alone, both physically and emotionally, and that is part of why it is such a terrible state of being for lawyers to occupy.
When I was in college and law school, I could pull all-nighters and it never affected me. Now I get sick all the time. Maybe this is just what happens when you start getting older.
Our final symptom is increased susceptibility to infection or illness. When you are tired and aren't sleeping, your body simply gets worn down, and when that happens, you become more likely to get sick from whatever virus or other malady that a healthy body might have prevented you from catching. We already saw the statistics about people who suffer from professional burnout being more likely to call in sick or to visit the emergency room. So this is a real cost of persisting in a state of perpetual stress and work with no end in sight. Are there personality traits that cause some lawyers to be more likely to experience professional burnout? The answer is yes, and if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. First of all, lawyers tend to be very hardworking by nature, so we are not averse to working a lot of hours or dealing with intense job demands or extreme time pressure. Remember what I said about the LSAT, or think about the bar exam for that matter? Part of the reason we had to take these tests was to make sure that future lawyers could perform under time pressure. Many lawyers also are perfectionists, type A's, so we tend to view hard work as the price of perfectionism. We've also gotten accustomed to a strong connection between our efforts and the rewards it brings. We did well in high school, and so we got into good colleges. We did well in college, and so we got into good law schools. We did well in law school, and so we got jobs at good law firms. All of this leads us to believe that if we pass the latest test, work really hard in our jobs, we'll be rewarded with a law firm partnership, or a general counsel title, or whatever it is you are aiming for. These personality traits tend to make us stay in roles that make us miserable, because we think we can stick it out, and ultimately, be happy once we are given the expected rewards. Of course, that doesn't always happen, and it's no reason to be miserable and to suffer professional burnout. Second, many lawyers are future-oriented, in the sense that we are able to delay gratification for many years if it's something we think is highly valuable. Think about the decision to become a lawyer. That's a 7-year track, including your college years, so each of us made the decision to delay gratification for 7 years, and to work very hard in school during that time, because we thought being a lawyer was worth it. The same tendency can cause lawyers to stay in a role that makes them miserable, thinking that the destination surely must justify the journey. A different aspect of being future-oriented is that lawyers are trained to see risks. We do this on behalf of clients every day. What is the risk that something will go wrong if we agree to this term in a deal? If we implement this change, what is the risk that someone will sue and what claims might they bring? When we turn this risk sensor on ourselves, it can easily contribute to our own feelings of anxiety, which is one of the main causes of professional burnout. What happens if I argue this motion and we lose? Will that mean I will lose my shot at becoming a partner? If my peers bill more hours than I do, will my annual bonus be lower? It's this ability and tendency to look for risks that can make our situation seem even worse and make it more likely we will get burned out in our jobs. The facts that law firms operate on a billable hours model and that they are partnerships where only a few lawyers each year are promoted to that level make the situation worse. We are constantly being compared to our peers, which is a negative feedback loop in terms of our self-esteem and our feelings of anxiety. In that way, it's similar to the anxiety that teenagers and other young people feel that is exacerbated by social media and the constant desire and ability to compare themselves to their peers. Your law firm may not be the same as your Instagram feed, but the fact that you are constantly comparing yourself and being compared to your peers isn't all that different, and it's just about as unhealthy as social media. Before we shift gears to talk about what steps we can take to identify professional burnout in ourselves and our colleagues and what we can do about it, we need to take a brief detour into the legal ethics rules. There are 3 main ethical rules that may be implicated when we are talking about lawyers who are suffering from professional burnout. The first is ABA Model Rule 1.1, entitled Competence, which provides that, quote, a lawyer shall provide competent representation to a client. Competent representation requires the legal knowledge, skill, thoroughness, and preparation reasonably necessary for the representation, end quote. The second is ABA Model Rule 1.16A2, which provides that, quote, a lawyer shall inquire into and assess the facts and circumstances of each representation to determine whether the lawyer may accept or continue the representation. Except as stated in paragraph C, a lawyer shall not represent a client, or, where representation has commenced, shall withdraw from the representation of a client if, 2. The lawyer's physical or mental condition materially impairs the lawyer's ability to represent the client, end quote. The third is ABA Model Rule 5.1, entitled Responsibilities of Partners, Managers, and Supervisory Lawyers, which provides that, quote, a partner in a law firm, and a lawyer who individually or together with other lawyers possesses comparable managerial authority in a law firm shall make reasonable efforts to ensure that the firm has in effect measures giving reasonable assurance that all lawyers in the firm conform to the rules of professional conduct. B. A lawyer having direct supervisory authority over another lawyer shall make reasonable efforts to ensure that the other lawyer conforms to the rules of professional conduct. C. A lawyer shall be responsible for another lawyer's violation of the rules of professional conduct if 1. The lawyer orders or, with knowledge of the specific conduct, ratifies the conduct involved, or 2. The lawyer is a partner or has comparable managerial authority in the law firm in which the other lawyer practices, or has direct supervisory authority over the other lawyer, and knows of the conduct at a time when its consequences can be avoided or mitigated, but fails to take reasonable remedial action, end quote. Of course, lawyers who are suffering from clinical depression or substance use disorder may be at risk of violating their duty of competence. While not as severe, some of the other symptoms of professional burnout that we discussed, either in isolation or in combination with each other, such as sleep disturbance, anxiety, and headaches, could impair a lawyer's performance to the extent that he or she might not be providing competent representation. Law firm partners and other supervising lawyers could have liability under the legal ethics rules if they are aware of your inability to practice law at the required level of competence and fail to take steps to remedy that situation. Certainly, if you have concerns in this regard and you have the ability to decline or withdraw from a representation as provided for in ABA Model Rule 1.16, you certainly should consider whether to do so, and most likely get some advice from a lawyer who is an expert in legal ethics to help guide your decision whether or not that lawyer is responsible for supervising you. Now, by bringing up the legal ethics rules, my intention is not to give you one more thing to be anxious about, and you should know that state bars are reluctant to bring disciplinary cases against lawyers for violations of the duty of competence if the lawyer has sought help for his or her condition, whether that is depression, substance use disorder, or professional burnout, which is sensible because we want to encourage lawyers to get the help they need. There are cases, however, where disciplinary charges were sustained against lawyers, where substance use disorder or clinical depression played a role, but that involved very serious underlying offenses such as misappropriating client funds. In addition to these extreme cases, lawyers who are overworked and overstressed to the point that they believe their bodies are failing them could run the risk of failing to provide competent representation. In my experience at Davis Polk, no stone ever was left unturned, and no detail ever was ignored, so the risk that any one of us was failing to provide competent representation didn't come into play. In fact, we were killing ourselves to provide outstanding representation to our clients. The clients were paying the bills for that representation, and we were paying our own price in terms of our physical and mental health. Turning now to the meat of today's program, what steps we can take to identify professional burnout in ourselves and our colleagues, and what we can do about it. I am going to lean heavily on the guidance provided by psychologists who are experts in this area. One such expert is Dr. Brian Russell, who is both a licensed psychologist and an attorney. And I have found his writings on this topic extremely insightful and valuable because he is both a clinician and a lawyer. The first thing to discuss is how do we as lawyers go about acknowledging burnout in ourselves and seeing it in our colleagues as a first step to getting help. Dr. Russell has set out a list of 6 questions that we can ask ourselves, and if we answer them honestly, these questions can help us to acknowledge our situation. Let's review these questions with some help from our lawyer colleagues.
Am I exhausted or stressed?
Have I become cynical or irritable?
Do I feel trapped in an unbalanced life?
Are my relationships outside of work suffering?
Am I self-medicating?
Can I sustainably meet all of my professional responsibilities under these conditions?
Similar to the cage questions I mentioned earlier to test for substance use disorder, these questions, if you answer them honestly, can be really helpful in determining if you are suffering from burnout. You must resist the natural tendency to shade your answers out of concern that you will appear weak to yourself or to your law firm or other employer. Your health, sanity, and happiness are just too important. So if you think you might be suffering from burnout, what can and should you do about it? Once again, relying heavily on Dr. Russell, he sets out a framework for lawyers to follow in terms of avoiding and addressing professional burnout. First of all, your overarching goal should be to have a sustainable law practice. That is both the best thing for you and also for your law firm, which wants to avoid lawyer turnover for the reasons we discussed before. And of course, both you and your law firm want to avoid other risks, such as potential malpractice claims or legal ethics violations. The next goal is to avoid self-medication, which could lead to substance use disorder and in some cases, also to clinical depression. If you are at risk of becoming burned out, the key step to take is to disengage if and as necessary, first of all to comply with your legal ethics and professional obligations, and second to recover, and third to formulate a sustainable return to work plan. While taking this step may seem difficult and perhaps impossible to someone in your shoes, the truth is that it is easier now than it ever has been for lawyers to do exactly that. Due to the efforts of the various state bars, law firms, and to a lesser extent, through training programs like this one, the state of awareness among lawyers and legal employers about the prevalence of professional burnout is at an all-time high. For the same reason, whatever stigma may have attached to lawyers who came forward to seek help for professional burnout in the past is largely gone. Accordingly, you should not feel that you can't come forward and ask for help and work accommodations if you believe you need them to avoid or to address burnout in your current role. To contrast the environment in law firms today with the one that existed when I was an associate at Davis Polk some 20 years ago and was experiencing professional burnout, lawyers like me only had 4 options available to us. First, you could try moving to another law firm where you might feel less pressure to bill hours. Among my litigation colleagues at Davis Polk, one option some took was to join a boutique litigation firm in the hope that it would afford them a similar experience in terms of legal work, but a better lifestyle. I never seriously considered this option for myself because I had heard that most boutique litigation shops didn't actually afford their associates a better lifestyle. With fewer lawyers to call upon, the constant drumbeat of client emergencies and new matters that had to be jumped on right away meant that the lawyers they had were as overworked as we were at the large law firms, and you were getting paid less at the boutique firm than at the large firm, so you ended up worse off overall. Second, you could take advantage of the law firm's part-time program, where you worked a reduced number of days or hours in return for reduced pay. Historically, the part-time track had been used by women who had taken time to have or raise children and were looking to return to the firm but couldn't do so full-time, but in more recent years, it had been made available to anyone in the firm who was looking to make a change. While it sounded good in concept, in my experience, the part-time program at law firms didn't deliver the goods in terms of providing lawyers with a reduced workload. Many of the litigators with whom I worked at Davis Polk who were in the part-time program seemed to work as much or almost as much as the rest of us, while receiving about half of the pay. The other concern with taking advantage of the part-time program at law firms is that doing so meant you were stepping off the partner track, which is another reason it was seen as undesirable. To Davis Polk's credit, the firm actually elevated a couple of people who had been in the part-time program to partner in the years that I was working at the firm, which went a long way to dispel this notion about stepping off the partner track. But the fact that these part-time lawyers were working too hard for the reduced pay they received was still true. Third, you could stay with your law firm, but transfer to another department or office within the firm in the hope of finding a better work-life balance. This was something I did. In my 5th year, I transferred from Davis Polk's New York office to its new office in Menlo Park, California. and it certainly helped with my burgeoning professional burnout, but it was not a panacea. While I had a better work-life balance living in California than I had when I was in New York, I was still billing a large number of hours, and I now had a long commute on top of my work schedule that I never had when I was living and working in Manhattan. Plus, about 6 months after I moved to Menlo Park, I was staffed on a huge M&A litigation matter that consumed nearly all of my time. That case culminated in a 3-week trial in Delaware Chancery Court where I lived out of a hotel room in Wilmington and did nothing but work non-stop for about 2 months. We won the trial, and the case was a great professional experience. But my point is that moving to Davis Polk's California office was not enough to rescue me from the professional burnout I was experiencing due to the pressure to bill so very many hours. The fourth option, and again the one I ultimately chose, was to leave Davis Polk and to take a job as an in-house litigator at NBC Universal in Los Angeles. That proved to be the solution to my professional burnout as a lawyer and was the key step I took that kept me in my right mind and still working in the law. Now, I don't mean to suggest that going in-house is for everyone or that it is a solution for all that ails law firm lawyers. All I can say that it was the right choice for me and that I don't regret that decision. What I do suggest is that if you are working at a law firm and you are miserable, that you make a change that is right for you. Maybe that is going in-house, maybe that is going back to school to get an MBA, or maybe that is doing something else entirely. The purpose of a wellness program is to help you identify some of the reasons why you might not be as happy working as a lawyer as you could or should be, and to suggest ways to improve your situation by making meaningful changes to improve your work-life balance if you can within the confines of your current role, or if you can't, by making a change that involves you doing something else. What you should not do is keep your head down and keep plugging away even if you hate it because you think it will get better on its own or because you don't know what else to do. If the goal of lawyers should be to have a sustainable law practice, what does that look like? According to Dr. Russell, lawyers practicing sustainably are mindful of their priorities and needs, balance their priorities, work being just one, keep their whys in focus, set appropriate boundaries, set contextually appropriate quality standards, delegate appropriately, and engage in appropriate self-care, sleep, exercise, diet, and relaxation. As I mentioned at the time I was coming up, the only way I could balance my job as a lawyer with my personal well-being was to leave Davis Polk and to take a job as an in-house lawyer. Lawyers working at law firms today have many more options than I did. Still, I am pleased to report that the choice I made has worked out great for me in that I have a sustainable law practice that meets all of the criteria that Dr. Russell advises we lawyers try to satisfy in our careers. While I don't intend to make this presentation any more about me, I wanted to share a few more details about my decision to move in-house, in the hope that hearing my experience will help other lawyers as they are thinking about their careers and looking to achieve a sustainable law practice. While I was working as a litigator at Davis Polk, I already was interested in working as an in-house lawyer. When you are at a law firm, and you see how much better it is to be a client, it's a walking advertisement for becoming an in-house lawyer, but I won't pretend that having a lower workload, less stress, and more predictable schedule weren't the primary reasons behind my decision. While I made a lot less money, particularly at first, I have never regretted my decision to move in-house. For the first time since I was a very junior lawyer at Davis Polk, I felt that I had a good balance between my job and my personal life. I was able to resume my hobbies, get myself back into good physical shape, take truly relaxing vacations, and develop a healthy social life. As if I scripted it for this presentation, I met my wife, who was also working at the time at NBC Universal, when I helped prepare her to sit for a deposition in a case I was handling. We're now more than 12 years into a very happy marriage, and we have 2 wonderful daughters, so I am very grateful for all of that. I shudder to think whether I would have found any of that personal happiness had I stayed at Davis Polk. One area where I am convinced I would not have fared as well was my physical health. While I was still in my 30s when I was at Davis Polk, I already was showing signs that law firm life was really bad for my health. I was 40 pounds heavier then than I am now, mostly because I couldn't find the time or energy to work out regularly when I was working so much. As a result of being heavier, I had high cholesterol and was taking statins to lower it. I also experimented with some fad diets like Atkins to try to slim down, which, If you've ever tried something like that where you only eat eggs, meat, and some vegetables, but no milk, bread, cereal, or other carbs, you know that it isn't sustainable. Even when I was on Atkins and had lost a lot of weight, I would get winded climbing a flight of stairs because I only dieted, I never worked out. I also couldn't help but view binging on food or alcohol as a reward for working so hard, because those things gave me pleasure and helped to relieve some of the stress. I remember vividly sitting at my desk one Sunday night. Usually I would come in around lunchtime on Sunday and work until 10 or 11 o'clock at night just so I could have Saturday mostly off from work, stressing over some brief emotion, running my fingers through my hair, seeing a few hairs fall out in my hands and believing all of my hair was going to fall out if I kept this up. Maybe my hair was starting to fall out due to the stress I was under, but it's just one of those memories that I have that caused me to realize that this was not healthy, and that if I stayed at Davis Polk for many more years, I was going to end up fat, bald, and maybe even dead from a heart attack or some other health condition I could have prevented with a better diet and some exercise. I don't want to be overly dramatic, and I share this only to say that there are warning signs when you are doing something that isn't healthy for you, and I would encourage everyone not to ignore those warnings. Fast forward to today. I'm in the best shape of my life, I have a wonderful family, I like what I do, and I have time for hobbies, travel, and many other things that I enjoy and that enrich my life. I don't think I would have any of that if I had stayed at Davis Polk based on the trajectory I was on at the end of my time there, and also what I imagine my future would have been like had I chosen to make Davis Polk my career. All things considered, I had a great experience at Davis Polk, and I don't mean to single out that firm for criticism. I think it would have been the same for me had I worked at most any other law firm, and because I was at Davis Polk, which has a reputation for being more of a lifestyle law firm, I probably had it better than my peers who went to other law firms that didn't treat their associates as well as Davis Polk treated me. Before we close, I want to speak briefly about what supervising lawyers can do to help avoid or address professional burnout in their law firms or law departments. The first thing is to look back at the list of the main causes of burnout in the legal profession: intense work demands, excessive workload, excessive time pressure, and the rest, and to ask yourself what you can do to eliminate or mitigate those conditions. It likely won't be possible to eliminate them entirely because lawyers represent clients, and most of the time, the clients are the root causes of many of those conditions. Law firms and companies are businesses too, so again, it won't be possible to eliminate billable hours, for example, but if you look hard at your organization, I am sure there are things you can do to reduce the importance of billable hours in annual bonus calculations, partnership decisions, and other aspects of law firm life. One thing you certainly can do is to do your part to reduce or eliminate unfair and disrespectful treatment of lawyers in your workplace. You're required by law and the legal ethics rules to do that, so please take that obligation seriously. In addition to these big picture objectives, there are small things supervising lawyers can do to help avoid or address professional burnout. Paula Davis has a great list of tiny noticeable things, or TNTs, that supervising lawyers can do to improve the culture at their organization as it relates to professional burnout. Let's take a look at these TNTs with some help from our lawyer colleagues.
Say thank you more, probably much more, than your current practice.
Offer in-time feedback to peers and direct reports.
Be clear when giving assignments in order to minimize conflicting requests and ambiguity.
Make constructive feedback a learning-focused, two-way conversation.
Keep people informed of changes.
Keep track of and talk about small wins and successes.
Check in on team members and colleagues.
Provide a rationale or explanation for projects, goals, and big picture vision.
Clarify confusing and missing information related to roles and tasks.
Prioritize you matter cues like calling people by name, making eye contact, and giving colleagues your full attention.
As a supervising lawyer, I can confess to not doing as many TNTs as I should, and I resolve to be better about this going forward. If you are a supervising lawyer, you can join me in promising yourself to do the same. It can make a huge difference in the work lives of the lawyers you supervise and in the culture you hope to create in your legal organization. Our final topic is to ask a question to which I hope you already know the answer. Is there anyone out there who can help me avoid or address professional burnout? Of course, the answer to that question is a resounding yes. Everyone is here to help you, and that includes your family and friends, your colleagues, including your peers, mentors, and leaders of your legal organization, clergymen and women, if you are a person of faith, lawyers' assistance programs, which exist in every state and most major cities, employer-provided therapy, and finally, private therapy. On this last point, there are experts like Dr. Brian Russell who specialize in helping lawyers with concerns about professional burnout, so that can be a great option for you. The main message is don't try to go it alone because making changes is difficult, and it's often a long-term project to go from where you are today to having a sustainable legal practice. As the saying goes, one who travels the fastest travels alone, but the one that travels the furthest travels with others. With that, we've reached the end of our time today. I hope you found our discussion helpful and that at least some of my advice will prove helpful as you strive to manage your mental health, stress, and overall well-being. At a minimum, you've earned 1 hour of wellness competence credit you can put toward your annual CLE requirements, and so at least that's one less thing you have to worry about. I hope you enjoyed today's program, and thanks for joining me.